What's up, guys? We are back again with another speaker comparison. I'm Shane.
I'm Bill.
And today we've got the Phase Tech PC 1.5s and the Wharfedale
12.2s.
All right, well, besides the speakers, this is what we've got hooked up today. We've got the brand new Cambridge Audio NQ preamp with their brand new Edge M monoblocks. Both amps will put out 200 watts per channel. Hooking everything up, we've got AudioQuest cables. AudioQuest, I believe the Fire XLR cables, and the speaker cables are their Type 5s. So speaker cables aren't exactly that much money. They're also not exactly cheap. Although the XLR cables are pretty pricey though. The speakers are rated at, Wharfedale's
are 20 to 120, and the Phase Techs are rated at 20 to 150.
So
both are 4 ohms.
So both are pretty much equally matched. Frequency response on the Phase Techs are 40 hertz to 22K, and the Wharfedales are 50 hertz to 20K. So the Phase Techs should be a little bit more detailed or brighter,
a little brighter
sounding. First song that we started off was with Ryan Adams' Wonderwall. What'd you think about that?
Well, it's one of my favorite songs to use for all our speaker comparisons because of the full range, the vocals. You get a really nice sampling of everything from just sort of like an a cappella vocal thing to some nice bass. For this particular challenge, I think that they both did really well. They both had great bass response. Wharfedales were a little more forward sounding, meaning the soundstage was a little closer to you as compared to the Phase Techs. Phase Techs were a little more natural sounding, a little wider, and the high end was a little brighter, especially in some of the more the acoustic parts of the guitar, when you can hear him sliding his hands up and down the fretboard. But both had overall really nice sound.
Yeah, I thought the soundstage on the Phase Techs were wider, broader sounding, going from like left to right. I did feel that the Wharfedales pulled outwards a little more, well, pulled forward a little bit more, but I did feel like the separation of like the guitar, the vocals, everything seemed a little bit more pushed back with the Phase Technologies. And then Ryan Adams' vocals were a little bit more, I don't want to say in this particular song that forward sounding, but they were more centrally focused. So if we're using our IKEA bookshelf as like say the stage, his vocals were more on top of the bookshelf, whereas the Phase Techs I felt were a little bit more pushed back behind the bookshelf. Again, I thought the Phase Techs definitely more spacious sounding, going from left to right, whereas the the Wharfedales were kind of more narrower sounding. But I think the song that we felt maybe was the most telling was the song from the Rolling Stones, was Sympathy for the Devil.
Yeah, that song sounded completely different on both speakers. We were both kind of scratching our heads because we've listened to this song a bunch of times on all kinds of different speakers, and it's the first time on the Wharfedales, the right channel sounded like basically it was a conga. It was just nothing but conga, a little bit of maracas mixed in there, and then some lighter keys. But yeah, it was really odd to hear that push so far forward and was just so much more present than everything else. Whereas on the Phase Techs, you got a much more balanced sound. Typically what we hear out of that channel is a lot of keyboards, and then you hear the congas. They're very present in the mix, but they're never dominating like they were with the Wharfedales. So with the Phase Techs, got a much more balanced sound. You heard the congas, you heard the maracas, I think more like how we're used to hearing them, and then the keys were much more present and a wider sound stage, I felt.
Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on with the Wharfedales in this particular song, because I'd never heard those congas whatsoever that prominent in the right channel. Like, that's the first thing that you hear is just that guy banging away in that right channel. I thought that was so different than any other speaker that we've ever heard before. So I don't know if we're listening to more of the enclosure, if that's really enhancing that specific frequency of that particular drum or the congas. But it was so different than anything we ever heard before.
We were literally looking at the speaker because we could hear every single movement, like when they slap, when they slide, when they're instead of like actually popping the conga, they do thumb pops and all kinds. But you could hear every touch on that drum. We've never heard it like that before ever.
And yeah, so I don't know what, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, it's not like I didn't like it. Like, I thought it was so different sounding that I actually liked it very much. But at the same time, since those congos were so kind of in your face, it kind of brought everything else forward too. Whereas we felt that the Ryan Adams song was kind of more forward sounding than the Face Tex. But with this particular song, everything was more in front of the bookshelf rather than sitting on the bookshelf. And then the Face Tex did what it did best, was keep everything like behind the bookshelf and almost seemed to like disappear in the front stage. Whereas the Wharfedales definitely had their own particular type of flavor that it was kind of just thrown out at you.
You could definitely hear the speaker.
Yeah.
Typically, in sort of like I guess the perfect setup, you don't actually hear the speaker, you don't actually hear the amplification. I mean, if you, in a perfect world, you would just hear what you were supposed to hear without actually hearing the processing and the flavor of the cabinet. But it's not always a bad thing. It's just, if a system is completely neutral, I guess, is kind of what you're looking for. And in this case, the Wharfedales are definitely not neutral, at least in that particular song.
Now, what I felt was getting enhanced with Wharfedales also kind of enhanced certain frequencies when we were listening to the Lenny Kravitz song. So I felt his voice, the vocals, maybe the mid-range was definitely more heftier sounding. Like you could hear him actually breathing into the mic as if he was kind of like standing in front of you. So you could hear him like breathe in and out. And then when he's playing the guitar, you could hear the guitar just kind of like boom, 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 just kind of just like really resonating right in front of you. Whereas on the Face Tex, I felt like I didn't hear any of that. I mean, if it was there, it was definitely more pushed back. It wasn't quite as prevalent in your face. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that in the Wharfedale. So that special characteristic that these Wharfedales have definitely separated itself from any other speakers that I've heard so far.
Yeah, again, so Lenny's a very breathy singer, at least in this particular song. And the characteristics of that Wharfedale definitely brought that out. And it also did it without making it also very sibilant. So you got a lot of that breathiness without that scratchy high-end S sound. Great for they do a lot of like, the hi-hat and the drum kit sounded really nice, very, very, very clean, very clear, without a lot of ear fatigue on those higher, the guitar solo. When Lenny's got that sort of sitar thing, I don't know if it's an actual sitar or just the keyboards playing, but the sitar can be a very, very twangy instrument. And on this, I think the fact that it didn't go to the 22,000 hertz kind of helped that, because you got the nice high, but it wasn't sharp. Versus, the Face Tex were, I thought they did, again, a nice job. You hear all the sounds very clear, very transparent speaker, but the soundstage on that, for me, with the Face Tex was wide, but not as deep as they were on the Wharfedales. And I kind of like the Wharfedales for that song a little bit better.
Yeah, that high frequency response for the Face Tex were definitely more sibilant on that song for sure, and especially at the volume that we're listening at, maybe slightly above normal, I would say. It was the Face Tex were a little bit more ear piercing, whereas the top end on the Wharfedales were a bit more rounded off on the top. I mean, still a lot of good detail up top, but just not quite as piercing sounding, not quite as sharp sounding. Mm-hmm. I think at more of a moderate level, the Face Tex definitely do shine really well and would match up really nicely against the Wharfedales. It's just that, having both of them level matched, the Face Tex were definitely brighter than the Wharfedales for sure.
Yeah, the great thing I like about these speakers is, they're very similar price point.
Yeah.
They're similar matched. A lot of times we compare speakers that aren't exactly apples and apples. These are very, very close, and they both have distinct sound characteristics, and they're both very enjoyable to listen to. I could listen to Face Tex all day long as I could with the Wharfedales.
And speaking of another thing that's kind of different was the bass response.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now, if you haven't noticed, the Face Tex have this, it's kind of a Kevlar glass reinforced piston driver, so it doesn't like curve inwards like your standard cone does, like on the Wharfedale. This is kind of a flat piston, and I do feel like...
I actually thought it was a cover over the speaker. I'm like, what the hell's this thing?
It's a piston. And I feel like that, maybe since it's designed that way, like a piston, like when the bass hits, it really punches.
Oh yeah, it punches really, it's very, very, very punchy.
Whereas on the Wharfedales, it's got a nice little kick to it. Not the same kind of like punch, but there's definitely more robust lower end to it. Whereas the even though the phase techs are rated to go lower, the Wharfedale is definitely.
I think that the cabinet on the Wharfedale is larger, and it's got the bigger bass port. So I think that passive bass is a little more present on that, just because it's got, you know, more room to expand.
Yeah, I mean both, you know, different characteristics for sure. I would say I don't think I have a favorite on either one of them, but I do feel that the phase tech is definitely more natural sounding.
Yeah, it's not a real, like, it doesn't really have its own super distinct sound. It is very neutral sounding.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's got a nice, you know, very clean, very clear. You can hear all your different frequencies very nicely, and it does a good job. It's a very nice speaker, and it's a very nice looking speaker as well. And definitely, it's a fairly small speaker for the capabilities of that thing. It's pretty small.
Yeah, tiny speakers. Definitely a distinct look. Like, I've never seen a speaker look like that before. And then the Wharfedales definitely have its own characteristic to it. It's, like I said, it sounds different than anything we've heard before. And, you know, I like it for what it is. Would I say I like it better than phase techs? I don't know. I think for certain songs, I like it better than phase techs. And then, you know, vice versa. So, I mean, I think you can't go wrong either way. I would definitely audition it if you can. Yeah. Or if there's like some kind of an in-home trial with the phase techs. I'm sorry, with the Wharfedales, if there's any home trial with the Wharfedales, definitely try it out first, because you might like it, you might not like it. But like I said, they're both very similar in price points. The phase techs are, I think, $635 for a pair, and the Wharfedales are $500 for the pair. So I think that might be the closest, you know, speaker battle that we've had so far.
That is the closest price point we've ever had in terms of these two speakers, and they, you know, they sound incredible. They're both great sounding speakers.
So yeah, the phase techs do cost a little bit more. I don't know if it's because of the build quality, because the phase techs do have a glossy finish, whereas the Wharfedales have that faux vinyl wood wrap to them. So maybe that's where the extra cost is going.
Yeah, I mean,
speakers.
I like the front plate on the Wharfedales, but yeah, the overall, the phase techs are a little more attractive looking.
The Wharfedales are also bi-wireable, so if you want to.
That's true, and they've got one of my favorite looking bi-wire setups, in terms of, instead of having to try and get all your cables facing like dead in, they're at angles, so it's a lot easier. They're offset, so it's a lot easier to hook up two sets of, you know, if you've got some really beefy cables, it's gonna be a lot easier to hook them up.
Smart thinking, Wharfedale.
Yes.
Again, these are just our subjective opinions. What we like, you guys might not like, and what you guys might like, we probably won't like. Everybody hears differently, so you might hear something differently than we do.
Just, you know, just to let you know, and I'm sure Shane has said this before, we don't ever pull anything right out of the box and just listen to and give it a review. Everything we play for you, all the reviews we do, everything has had, you know, quite a bit of time on it, at least a couple weeks worth of playthrough, to get it broken in, warmed up. So you're not getting anything raw. We use the same cables. If I'm cooking my left speaker to my right speaker, they're the same cables. I'm not using different kind of cables. None of that nonsense.
Yeah, we read the comments, okay, guys? We read them.
We know, you know, we may not be engineers, but we know a little bit about what we're doing.
Well, anyways, that's our thoughts on both of these speakers. Have you guys heard the speakers? And if so, what are your opinions on both? Leave a comment down below and let us know. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again in the next video.
Peace.